I think we can not fix everything by making Bitcoin the global reserve asset, but I think we can fix a lot of stuff. I think we can fix actually more things than most people realize, maybe even most Bitcoiners realize.
Would you take out your checkbook and write a check for the government or for the military to go fight a war in Ukraine or in Israel or whatever? My hunch is that most people would not take out their checkbook. And if you divide the total war on terror, if you divide it by the population of the US, it's like $80,000 per taxpayer.
Lightning is the best thing in the crypto ecosystem. It is the coolest technology to come out of cryptocurrency ever. Once you kind of step off the fiat treadmill, the question is, what next?
All right, Chris, we are here at the Hacker Garage. How are you today, man?
Doing pretty good, man. Yeah, how are you?
Fantastic. I had Gustavo from Swapido on the podcast. He told me, hey, you got to meet up with some Bitcoiners in Guadalajara. And so I'm here for a wedding, and I figured I'd come pop by. We went to a donut shop that accepts Bitcoin, and we met there, had a great conversation. So figured we would continue it today, man. And
cool.
Yeah, you got a lot to share. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah, Gustavo's a great dude, and I'm glad he connected us. Yeah.
Absolutely. And very, very excited about what you guys are doing here, what you're personally working on. Why don't you just give us like a little background on who you are, why you're in Bitcoin, and what you're working on.
Cool. Yeah. So my name is Chris Guida. I'm a developer. I've been a professional developer since 2010. I've been a Bitcoin ecosystem developer since 2020. And basically my mission is to make Bitcoin the reserve asset of the world. I think it's kind of a real bummer, to put it mildly, that the dollar is the reserve asset right now, because there's people that can print it, and that might not sound that bad to somebody who's like coming into Bitcoin from the outside. But once you kind of look at all of the downstream effects of that, it's pretty horrifying. I think we can not fix everything by making Bitcoin the global reserve asset, but I think we can fix a lot of stuff. I think we can fix actually more things than most people realize, and maybe even most Bitcoiners realize. And so, I'm just trying to make that happen. And right now, Bitcoin is a great store of value. It's kind of known as a store of value. But I think one of the reasons why, or probably the main reason why it's a great store of value is because there's the chance that it might become the reserve asset. And so people are holding it in the hope that it's going to go up, basically. And so because there's a chance that it could sort of take the seat of the dollar, that means that it might go up a lot from here. So it's so there's a lot of demand for something like that. And then, of course, as you mentioned before the podcast, it has this very tightly limited supply. And so if you have always increasing demand and you have a supply that's just fixed, then that means the price per Bitcoin is going to just continue to go up. There's no way that Bitcoin is going to unseat the dollar unless Bitcoin is a better medium of exchange than the dollar. The reason why the dollar is the reserve asset right now is because it's the best medium of exchange. It's just accepted in the most places. It came from this position of kind of everybody in the world sort of trusted the U.S. government and trusted the dollar, the full faith and credit of the United States. And so, it has enjoyed sort of this privileged position for a long time, and in recent decades, it's really started to sort of abuse that position, in my opinion. Basically, right now, I think as Bitcoiners, we really need to work on making Bitcoin a better medium of exchange. If you talk to most merchants are not just going to accept Bitcoin. You kind of have to do some things in order to accept Bitcoin, especially if you want to hold your own keys and you don't want to trust some third-party custodian with processing your payments and holding your coins. And obviously, if you are doing that, if you're trusting some third-party custodian to hold your keys, then you're not really using Bitcoin. As Satoshi said in the white paper, we have this system of banking, this system of central banking, and it's great and all, but I'm paraphrasing. But the big problem with it is is all of the trust that is needed in order to make it function. You put your bank there, and then maybe they give you a haircut, or maybe they freeze your account or something like that. or you're holding dollars, even if you're holding cash, maybe you put it under your mattress. Oh, here comes the Federal Reserve. They're going to double the money supply. Oh, now your cash is worth half as much as it was. So, there's just all of this, basically Satoshi's point with Bitcoin was, there's really just too much trust in third-party custodians, and we should have a system that can be self-custody. So that's Bitcoin, and that's why I'm excited about Bitcoin. And I think, if we're really going to make this thing work, we need more merchants using it, and we need merchants who are running their own nodes and holding their own keys. So that's the broad mission. And
yes, sir.
The narrow mission is just forming a community, trying to get a circular economy going with Bitcoin, trying to teach devs how to get started with Bitcoin Dev, and trying to get merchants set up to accept Bitcoin.
Fantastic. Thank you for the introduction, and I love that you just go straight into it, because having a grand mission is going to be key. There's obviously volatility in Bitcoin, there's volatility in life, and so if you have this vision for a better future, that can be incredibly motivating. Like that for me is, even my girlfriend said to me yesterday, she's like, it seems like you really found your thing, you found your calling or whatever. And I think that's probably the case. Like I have never woken up more excited to just get after it. And it's not necessarily for me about, it's definitely not for me about getting more dollars or even more Bitcoin. Like I think we've been programmed to just always want more and more and more. And if you have more and more and more, that's fine for you. But if your neighbors and your family and your community is not on the life raft with you, which is why I really appreciate where you're coming from, where you're talking about, opening the door and bringing others along. Help me to improve my messaging around articulating Bitcoin to merchants or to people that maybe don't understand like some of the initial considerations for, if you like, let's say you see the number going up, you're like, I want some of that. I provide services. I was talking to someone who's a contractor, does he builds kitchens and remodels and stuff. And I was just walking him through some of the things to think about. And I mentioned many Bitcoinisms, right? They're cliches are cliches because they're true often. There's truth behind them, not your keys, not your coins. But even, let me just add this, like what I try and explain to people is you're playing a Monopoly game. Everyone's played Monopoly, and there's one person at the table who can just grab from the bank whenever they want. If they grab too much from the bank, they're going to end up with all the real estate. They're going to end up with all the real estate because they can just get free money, right? And that's sort of the bottom line is it's an obfuscation between we all have to trade our time and our energy, our blood, sweat, and tears for money. And there's another small group of people, I don't know how many there are, but it's small, that can just hit that money printer. So help me to just communicate Bitcoin better, I think would be a good place to start this. Like why is Bitcoin valuable? Like that was a question you asked me the other day. I showed up to the Bitcoin meetup. You guys were like, so you're here for the crypto thing? And so a little test there, but
yeah. I think I said, so are you here for the Bitcoin or the crypto?
I was so caught off guard.
And you were like, I'm here for the Bitcoin. And I was like, good answer.
Yes, sir. Yeah. But even myself, like I'm aware that I'm still very new to this. Like to have the thought that you understand Bitcoin fully would be very naive, because even it's like Socrates said, I'm the smartest man because I know that I know nothing. And we're still learning what Bitcoin is and how it actually integrates into the world. But what are some of the things that help people early on to understand it?
Yeah, so that's a very long question with a very, very complicated and nuanced answer. Basically, for most people, Bitcoin is useful as a savings vehicle, because you can just kind of buy it and hold it, and it'll be really volatile. It's getting less volatile, but it's still really volatile compared to what most people are used to, which is the dollar or the peso or whatever. So they're used to being able to just kind of store their wealth into a store of value that sort of like slowly evaporates over time, but it evaporates slowly enough that they don't really mind, or they don't really notice. Maybe they should notice more. But Bitcoin basically solves that problem. Once you see that problem, once somebody makes you aware, oh hey, there's like a guy with a money spigot basically, and outpours money for him, not for anybody else, but for him, and basically just steal wealth from everybody. It's a regressive tax. It steals wealth mostly from poor people, and kind of shoves it up the pipe to all the rich people. And then of course we have income taxes and things that are progressive that try to like rectify that, but of course, inflation is a much larger feature, a much larger economic feature. And so mostly what you're seeing is just increasing wealth inequality.
A lot of people see that problem, especially where I'm from.
Yeah.
But they have the wrong solution, in my opinion. I'll have these conversations where people are like, well, we should lower the credit card rates. Like we should force credit card companies to lower their rates, or we should confiscate property.
Make billionaires pay their fair share. We should not let the greedy, capitalist, store owners, raise their prices. And it's like, or we should have a minimum wage. We should not let anybody get hired for, if they're asking for $14 an hour, like we should not allow them to be hired. And it's like, okay, I don't know how that's gonna fix anything.
Anytime the government gets involved in the free market, it tends to make things worse. And I know we had some conversations around capitalism, anarcho-capitalism. What's your view on the free market and why it's either a great thing that we should keep nurturing and educating, or like why it's important, or do you think there's the fact that we have dollars that are printed, does that corrupt the possibility of a free market in the first place?
So I have my pinned tweet is a thing that says capitalism without sound money is not capitalism. So I definitely agree with that last thing that you said, where when somebody can just print money and steal everybody's wealth, I would say like. Obviously, there's like gray zones where some things are more capitalism and some things are more socialism. I think when you get to like the 50% mark, like if the government is taking half of your earnings, I think you could probably call that socialism, and anything more than that, socialism, and maybe communism. Like you're getting into communism.
We're borderline on that in the US right now.
Yeah.
We're actually probably higher. What am I saying? If you add up all your taxes, your sales taxes, your internal revenue service taxes, your property taxes, it could easily be more than 50% of your income.
Yeah, for sure. I think we're actually doing better than most countries, which is surprising. But there's like actual socialist countries that will do 50, 60, 70% of your income, or up to 90% is what we had apparently during World War II. But yeah, there comes a point where the government is just looting everyone. And that's not a free market, and it's not capitalism, because capitalism is a capitalist system incentivizes accruing capital, right? So it's supposed to incentivize people to have a stockpile of wealth and to keep adding wealth to that stockpile. But if the government can come in and just raid it at any time, then you're not incentivizing people to do that. You're not incentivizing people to create wealth. You're incentivizing people to just basically, you're teaching by example that looting is okay. So people go, well, the government looted me, so I'm going to go loot my neighbor. Basically, it's you're setting an example that stealing is okay. So then that changes the whole moral fabric of the economy, and everybody just starts stealing from everybody, and there's all this just grift and fraud everywhere, which is kind of what you're seeing today.
Sure.
So, it's not just about, they can steal. That's bad enough. But it's also, it just disincentivizes the creation of wealth. It disincentivizes good behavior. It punishes people who behave well, and it rewards people who do terrible things. That's what you see, is you see more and more and more people just doing terrible things, and people who are trying to do good things are just kind of getting brushed to the side. So.
Fascinating. Yeah, the other angle.
I wanted to answer your question though. The first question that you had was like, how do you communicate Bitcoin to merchants and just people holding? I don't know if you want to go back to that.
Please,
but I had kind of a thing. Where
I had some incredible pizza and beers the other night at a place down the road from here.
Gibbons, right?
At Gibbons, yeah.
And
you guys clearly have communicated to him. He didn't fully understand, the owner didn't fully understand Bitcoin, but he said, look, I've got these guys coming in here. They're telling me about it. They're preaching it to me. And so shoot, it's such a small percentage of their income as a restaurant right now. It's not like these merchants need to take the Bitcoin and get pesos right away. So
right.
It's a way for them to accrue value and maybe upgrade the facilities in a year or two or something like that. But yeah, how do you approach that? And secondly to that, tie this in, is why merchant adoption? Why is that so critical? Why is it so important that people accept Bitcoin as a medium of exchange?
Oh man, yeah, another large question. Yeah, so kind of going back to what I was saying before, you've got this, you've got Bitcoin as a savings vehicle. But the reason why it's a good savings vehicle is because it has ever-increasing demand and a static supply, or a capped supply. So if we get to the point where Bitcoin is not going to become a better medium of exchange than the dollar or the peso, so if people get disillusioned and they kind of come to the realization that Bitcoin is never actually going to be accepted directly by merchants, so the way that it happens is even merchants who are Bitcoiners and save in Bitcoin, they don't directly accept Bitcoin. And if anything, they accept dollars or pesos, and then they convert later into Bitcoin if they're trying to buy Bitcoin and save in Bitcoin. But if people start getting disillusioned that, maybe this is never going to catch on as a direct medium of exchange, then that kind of kills Bitcoin's ability to it kills demand for Bitcoin, right? Like the reason why the dollar is the reserve asset is because everybody accepts the dollar, right? It's a popular medium of exchange, and it's most of the time it's a very functional and smooth experience. So what I'm trying to say is Bitcoin is going to stop being a good store of value if the prospect of it becoming a better medium of exchange than the dollar goes away. And so this is why I think it's paramount for Bitcoiners to care about merchant adoption, because basically, Bitcoin is kind of it's almost kind of like a baby, or like an unborn baby, and there's an umbilical cord, that attaches. It's kind of dependent on the dollar, sure. Because right now, in order to the most popular way to get Bitcoin is to buy it using fiat on a fiat exchange. We have to break the just to kind of hammer this home. If we want Bitcoin to replace the dollar as the reserve asset, it has to do all of the things that the dollar does. Otherwise, better than the dollar. Yeah, exactly. Preferably 10x better, because people are not going to just drop the dollar, which they've been used to for the last several decades, and just switch to something new. It's going to have to be way better, and so we're going to have to make that case, and we're going to have to and so Bitcoiners have to be honest with themselves. It isn't that right now. I mean, it's just more difficult to use Bitcoin than to use the dollar or the peso right now. We have to be honest. But the good news is that it isn't always going to be that way. And the things that are holding it back are fixable. It's just going to be, just a lot of iteration, So the biggest issues for me are actually taxes and reporting. People are reluctant to start accepting Bitcoin because they're kind of like, okay, well, how do I track everything? And then how do I report it? And is the government going to audit me or come after me or fine me or something like that? And there's just a lot of uncertainty around that kind of thing. And then just the actual user experience of using Bitcoin, accepting Bitcoin directly as a merchant, it's just not quite as good as credit cards. If you're a little bit technically inclined, then it's easy to make the experience better than credit cards, because obviously credit cards they tend to charge a lot. I think it's like 3% or something like that. Whereas with Bitcoin, especially if you accept Lightning, it's just a few Satoshis, it's
and if you're a restaurant, your margins are maybe 10%, 15% profit margin per year at the end of the year. So if you tell a restaurant, hey, you can cut 3%
out of all of your purchases,
right?
Yeah, they're going to be really excited about
that. That's a huge thing to move the needle. Yeah,
exactly. So I think, did that answer your question? I was going.
Definitely, yeah. So you're basically saying that in order for Bitcoin to become in order for it to maintain its store of value narrative, medium of exchange is paramount, is what you said.
Yes.
And I agree 100%. And even that being said, and this is why I love going to meet Bitcoiners in real life, because until you've started to talk to Bitcoiners and realize that this is not just something on Twitter, it's not tangible for people. My girlfriend the other night did her first Lightning payment, and just seeing the smile on her face, and I was trying to articulate and explain, like, the funds, the Bitcoin that you just sent to them, they have it. When it shows up on their phone, they see that little check mark, and that's final settlement. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've ever run a business, you know that you receive payment from somebody. Like, I used to have a supplement company. We would receive payment, and then 4 days later, we'd get a notification saying, oh, this person was fraudulent, and now the credit card company did the chargeback. You just sent the product to somebody, and they didn't even pay for it.
Now you're SOL.
And that's a very, very common thing that merchants have to deal with. So the credit card has that drawback. It obviously is very convenient, I agree, but it's not that far off.
And this is what I was trying to say. I mean, basically, if you're a little bit technically inclined and you're a merchant and you have some product or service that you're selling, Bitcoin is way better than fiat. But for sort of like the long tail of everybody else who isn't that technical, we have work to do to overcome that. Basically, fiat has a bit of a lead on us. On those things, but like I said, it's all surmountable. We just have to keep iterating, and eventually we'll be a little bit better, and then eventually we'll be 10 times better, and then eventually we'll be 100 times better, and then eventually everybody's going to be like, you'll be laughed at if you still accept fiat.
I say, look, you're not too late to Bitcoin when you can still buy it with paper, right? There will be a time in the future where somebody's like, you'll have some paper in your hand, you'll be like, hey, give me some Bitcoin. People will laugh at you for that.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's how far out do you think we are from a potential hyper-Bitcoinized world?
Man, I mean, hyper-Bitcoinization is one of those things where, so I don't know if you've read the original blog post where they talked about hyper-Bitcoinization. I think it was Daniel Krawitz in the Nakamoto Institute. I'm not sure. I might be getting that wrong. But it's an article from a while ago, 2014, 2015, something like that. And it basically is Bitcoin is a black hole, and it's just going to absorb everything. And all of the fiat currencies are going to come to an end, and they're all going to hyperinflate, and everything is going to hyperinflate into Bitcoin. And I think you're going to see some of that. I don't think there's not going to be any fiat currencies left, once hyper-Bitcoinization is done. But I think maybe a sort of a less extreme version of that is definitely going to happen, and you're seeing it right now, where you've always had hyperinflation, right? That's always been a thing with fiat currencies. It's especially governments just love being able to print money. And if they don't care about whether their population is prospering, then they can just be like, oh, wow, look at this. I can just print more and more money. It's free. So that's how you destroy your currency. So there's always been an incentive to do that. But with Bitcoin, there's an even stronger incentive, which is, you can print money and you can use that to buy Bitcoin. So, I mean, obviously people are going to do this, right?
Well, yeah. And
if you have the lever,
it's the most obvious move ever, right? It's the ultimate, because it's the window to pull that off is narrow.
Exactly.
As soon as the rest of the world goes, the US is just printing dollars and buying Bitcoin, they're going to do the same shit.
Right.
And sooner or later, the dollar is going to lose extreme amount of purchasing power.
Right. Yeah. Well,
or at least compared to Bitcoin, right?
Yeah. I mean, so there's two different ways to acquire Bitcoin, right? And you see this at the individual level, you see this at the merchant level. There's moral ways to acquire Bitcoin, and there's immoral ways to acquire Bitcoin. And so, what I tell people is, just get a job. Spend less than you make and put the rest into Bitcoin, or put some of the rest into Bitcoin.
Mining fiat.
Yeah. And if you have to get paid in fiat, go ahead and do that. Just put, DC is called dollar cost averaging. Just put the same dollar amount into Bitcoin every week or every month or whatever. Where was I going? So that would be what I would consider to be a moral way. You're creating wealth And then from the wealth that you create, you spend some of it and you kind of, have a little bit of fun or whatever. And then the rest, store it in Bitcoin. And then you wait, and then it's worth even more down the road. And so that's the moral way to get Bitcoin, is you create wealth and then you store some of that wealth that you created in Bitcoin. The immoral way, of course, is to destroy wealth or to steal wealth from other people and put that into Bitcoin. And so this is why we have a whole crypto industry. That's what it's for.
Sure.
It's to steal your Bitcoin,
yeah.
In order to give Bitcoin to the scammers, right? So that's pretty much the entire reason the crypto ecosystem exists. It's a big casino, and Bitcoin is sort of the reserve asset of the crypto casino. So at the end of the day, everybody withdraws to Bitcoin. I don't know if you saw the hack, the big $1.6 billion hack that they did, Bybit.
Sure.
Where they stole a bunch of Ethereum, and then what did they do? They sold it all for Bitcoin.
Really?
So
I did not know that element of it. Wow.
So everybody wants Bitcoin, including good people and including not so good people.
Yeah.
So governments in the future or in the present, they can acquire Bitcoin by stealing it, which is actually how the U.S. government acquired their current strategic Bitcoin reserve. They did. It was mostly asset forfeiture, which is basically like, we consider that somebody has considered a crime, and so we're going to take their Bitcoin. So those people, I guess, didn't have very good OPSEC. Otherwise, yeah.
And what is OPSEC?
Operational security. Yeah. So it's kind of like, just don't tell everybody that you have Bitcoin, and don't tell everybody how much you have.
Sure.
And basic sort of protections against government actors coming in and confiscating stuff. Obviously, if you committed a really bad crime, then I guess part of the justice process is that you're gonna experience some pain, but basically the government has decided to steal a bunch of Bitcoin, and they have according to them, they have like a couple 100,000 Bitcoin, and then this is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So they acquired it in a way that I would consider to be immoral. Now again, I'd have to look into the cases of each of those and see, okay, is the, what's worse, the crime that happened or the fact that the government stole this person's money? So
sure.
Maybe there's some gray areas. I don't know. But there are moral ways for the government to acquire Bitcoin too. So one example of there's this idea of a sovereign wealth fund. I think Norway has a strategic oil reserve where they just have a bunch of oil, and then every year or something like that, there's a dividend, and the government just sends everybody a check based on the appreciation of the oil, or the sales of the oil or something like that. I'm not sure how it works. And then Alaska has something very similar.
I heard Bhutan is doing something like that as well with their Bitcoin.
I didn't hear that they were doing a sovereign wealth fund. I guess I heard something like that. Yeah, I don't know how they're doing the distributions,
sure.
But that would be really, really cool if they did that. I did hear that they are mining Bitcoin and they're saving it and they're using it. Yeah, so Bhutan actually is my favorite example of somebody who's just acquiring Bitcoin in a totally moral way, right? They're just providing value to their citizens. They're generating wealth. They're mining Bitcoin. They're helping to secure the Bitcoin network, and then they're taking some of that and they're putting in this stash. And then they're going to wait, and then they're going to use that for the continued benefit of their citizens. Mm-hmm. That's totally okay. Some Bitcoiners who are more on the anarchist side would probably not like for me to say that, but
right, because it's a government. They just want no government, which
right, exactly. They would say, oh, well, the moral thing is the government shouldn't exist, and it's like, well, we can get into that if you want. That's another whole can of worms.
Sure.
But given that most countries have fiat currencies now, and most of them are really struggling to act morally, given this ability to print money, I like to compare the ability to print money to the one ring in Lord of the Rings. I like to say, it's basically it's the ring of power, and it corrupts, right? When you give somebody that much power, they start out going I'm going to do a lot of good with this, I'm going to fix things, and then they just keep printing it more and more and more and more, and after a few years, you're like, oh my God, this person's just doing the worst possible shit. So power corrupts, absolute power corrupts, absolutely, and given the incentives of, okay, you can print money and you can use it to buy Bitcoin, I think probably most countries are going to do that, at least at first. But what you're going to see is that just like with crypto and just like with NFTs, just like there's always a new grift, because the old grift, people kind of wise up to it, right?
Yeah.
I
haven't heard of NFTs are not popular in this bull market.
Exactly,
right?
exactly. Yeah, people are sick of NFTs.
Yeah, because they got rubbed so hard.
Everybody got rubbed, and meme coins. There's been actually calls for Gary Gensler to come back.
No.
And I always thought Gary Gensler was he did the best he had with the job that he just did his job, as far as I could tell. But that's another whole story. But where's I going with that? So the grift, people always wise up to the grift, right? And so, I think countries are going to print money and buy Bitcoin.
Uh-huh.
I think they probably already are, to some extent. But, eventually people will wise up to that. And then basically governments are just going to have to behave better. Their fiat currencies are going to have to compete with Bitcoin as a store of value and as a medium of exchange, but most importantly as a store of value. And so, the population of the world is going to have to wise up. To some extent, it's inevitable that they'll wise up because they're just going to get rubbed at first. But then eventually people are going to learn their lesson, and they're going to be like, okay, which governments are behaving well and which governments are not behaving well? And the governments that behave well and sort of, they have a currency that actually works well and actually generates wealth, I think those are going to be sort of the survival of the fittest. Eventually the governments that are just good are going to survive. And I know the anarchists are going to take issue with that. There's no good governments, but
I love the anarchists, but when you have a deep conversation and you try and really stand on the side of zero government is the solution, you're kind of ignoring just the idea that, hey, maybe we should go a little smaller. Maybe we should cut the government by 10% or 20% instead of go to zero right away. And there's a lot of things that I have a hard time, I'll have these conversations with my dad. I'm like, we should just, everything the government touches gets worse. Okay? that's where my bias is. I want that to be true, but then he'll be like, well, what about the national parks? Or what about, what do they call it? When there's overfishing in certain areas, tragedy of the commons, things like that. There are things that I could live with the government regulating. In my opinion, it's just gone way too far.
Yeah,
Mexico,
and again, I think a lot of the bad stuff, a lot of the reason why the government governs so poorly is because there is no feedback mechanism for them to govern well, other than just people rising up and protesting in the streets and threatening to, revolt, basically. That's the money printer insulates them from the consequences of their decisions.
Yes.
They can just keep making bad decisions again and again and again, and for the most part, there's no feedback, right? They don't get fired. There's what's known as the deep state. Just people who just kind of are working for the government through their entire careers, and they never have any. There's no consequences to making bad decisions.
So on this topic, this is something that I was not aware of, but I was having a conversation with a Mexican dude at the wedding the other night, and he showed me this chart right here. So this is the peso versus the dollar. You see that spike right there? Mm-hmm. That spike was the peso declining against the dollar when Trump said that we were going to put fees or tariffs on goods from Mexico. 2 days later, China comes in, and look at what happened to the peso, right? It regained value. So what that says to me is it's not as the U.S. is not the top dog. It's not. Yes, it's the biggest bully in the park, but this is evidence that even the most powerful country in the world can't just wave a magic wand and have its way with Mexico. Mexico has the ability, for better or worse, to partner with a China or Russia or one of these other major powers. And this is something I didn't hear anything about on Twitter or in the news and the media in the US. The story, the narrative was, look at Trump, he's so strong. He's, Mexico caved and put 10,000 troops on the border. But here in Mexico, the narrative is, well, actually, the president of Mexico is a very smart, savvy political leader who's well aware of how to play the cards, and she's running a third world country, and it's just a sign.
I think Mexico is. I don't know if you could call it a third world country anymore. It's
You think
definitely. I mean, yeah. There's still parts of Mexico that are really bad.
No, I mean it's the term almost is like too binary, because if you come here, you'd be surprised at how great the infrastructure is, the services. There's a lot of potholes in the roads. They could probably do a better job with that, but like you can live it's not the US, like in terms of just the luxuries and things like that, but you've been here for 7 years and you're very happy here. Like maybe why do you prefer to live here over the US is the question. And there's probably many other people in your same situation that are looking at, hey, maybe I can have a better quality of life in Mexico or in another one of these countries. And I wanted to also just kind of talk to you about how you see the future of Latin America in general. Like, do you see this as like if you were going to put money on the growth of the US or the growth of Latin America, how would you divide up your allocation of capital?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head. I mean, I think that if you want to make an analogy, I think Latin America is the growth stock, and the U.S. is the incumbent that's a little bit in trouble, and it's getting competition from all sorts of places right now. That being said, Latin America has problems, and I don't know if I'm like totally dead set on staying here forever, but I made a bet, a few years ago, and that bet has paid off, So obviously I love living here because it's just more affordable. I mean, I remember living in Austin, Texas, for a bit in 2016. And I was like, all right, this is cool, but I'm like running out of money, it's just very expensive to live here. And then I tried Mexico for a few months, and I was like, this is almost the same standard of living that I got in Austin, but I'm paying like 20% as much. Like I'm just paying like that tiny fraction of what I was paying in Texas. And so I just kind of came to the realization, like, American cities are kind of a scam. Like you're really not getting your money's worth. Especially if you're on, if you have some savings in Bitcoin and, Bitcoin is really volatile. You don't want to have a lavish lifestyle. You want to make sure that you're going to be able to put food on the table. So Latin America is a great way to if you're a Bitcoiner and you're trying to make your financial situation work for the long term, it's definitely worth it, I think, to check out Latin America and spend at least a few years here. Just kind of zooming out a bit, I read this book called The Sovereign Individual several years ago, and it's pretty popular among Bitcoiners because it was written in 1997. But have you heard of it, by the way?
Yes, I have. Yeah. Yeah,
it was written in 1997, but it predicts the rise of stateless digital money is what they call it, so it was like 11 years ahead of the curve on that. And then so it predicts that, and then it predicts like all of the basically fallout from that and what's going to happen. And basically, what they predict is that the same thing that happened to the Soviet Union when they ran out of funding is going to happen to other large nation states. So the U.S., for instance, they didn't talk about China much, but I think China it also applies to China. Actually, China is sort of even more of a sort of quintessential fiat nation state, endgame fiat, late stage fiat nation state. But when these countries run out of the ability to enforce taxes, first they're going to lose the ability to impose the inflation tax because Bitcoin just lets you opt out of that. And then they're going to lose income tax and capital gains tax, as people are able to transact without, being surveilled by nation states. Eventually, we're going to starve the beast. Eventually, these nation states they're not going to, and they use that funding to enforce the taxes, but they also use that funding to fund their militaries. And so, I would definitely recommend The Sovereign Individual to everybody who's watching this, because it's a really interesting argument, and I think they have a very deep understanding of sort of the economic and military sort of milieu that we find ourselves in. And, so the idea is, you have all of this funding that you bring in, and the more funding that so the game of fiat money is just, what's the largest economy and the largest military that you can build? Because that one's going to win, right? It's kind of like winner take all, it's like, and so what they say is, well, basically the US beat the Soviet Union because the Soviet Union had a fairly large economy, but a smaller population, and their economy was not as free. It just didn't generate as much wealth. And so the government, which sits on top of the economy and siphons wealth away from the economy, is going to be a lot smaller. And so you have this kind of you have less funding. And when you have less funding, you can't afford a military that's as large. And so you can't project military power at such great distances. And so what happens is, what happened with the Soviet Union is it broke apart. You had these like Soviet socialist republics that became sort of sovereign at that moment. So you had like Kazakhstan and Ukraine and the Baltic states, that are no longer part of the USSR. And so they say, that's going to happen to the U.S. and that's going to continue happening, until basically the nation state is cut down to size. I don't know what the sort of equilibrium size is once we go back to sound money, but they make a compelling case that it's a lot smaller than what we're seeing today.
I think so, for sure. I mean, how do you fund 800 military bases all over the world?
Yeah.
Without printing money?
The reserve.
The question that I always ask people is, like, if you're on the side of like, you support some type of government expenditure, I always like to ask people, okay, would you take out your checkbook and write a check for the government or for the military to go fight a war in Ukraine or in Israel or whatever? If so, great, like that's what you want to do. But my hunch is that most people would not take out their checkbook. And if you divide the total spending, I might get the number wrong, but if you do the total war on terror, if you divide it by the population of the US, it's like $80,000 per taxpayer.
Per person, yeah.
Per person.
Per taxpayer, yeah.
Which is just...
It's insane.
That's more than the average income for a year. So you're going to tell me you're okay working for a year to fund some war that has no impact, actually probably a negative impact on your security.
Yeah.
It doesn't make any sense at all.
Yep. Yeah, exactly. And, like if you go back to and study the history of central banking, it's not some big secret that the central banks usually were funding both sides of the war, which is it's extremely profitable because...
Extremely immoral.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Yeah, I mean, obviously, but it's easy to see why they do it, because if you're a psychopath and you have no moral compass, and you lend a bunch of money to one side, you lend a bunch of money to the other side, it kind of doesn't matter who wins, because the winner has to pay back all the money that you loan them, and the loser has all of their land and property stolen by the winner, and then they have to pay you back, and then the winner, which owes a bunch of money to you, can basically give you all of that, all of the stuff that they took from the loser. So, the central banks just end up owning everything.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I try and, there's so much distraction. Even now, today, I see a lot of Bitcoiners falling into this trap of thinking Trump's the savior, he's coming, Doge is going to fix everything, look at America's going to be great again. And if you don't take away the power of the Federal Reserve to print the money, all of Trump's actions, in my opinion, are mute. They're not actually solving. It's like if you have cancer or if you have a health problem, it's like taking a pill to solve the symptom in the short term. It's just that same symptom's going to come back as soon as the cancer grows again.
Yeah, so the difficult thing about that is that I agree. But I don't think it makes sense for, people like Ron Paul like to say, and the Fed. I honestly don't think that's a good course of action. I don't think that the central bank in the US should get shut down and we move to a hard money standard, but China and Russia keep their fiat standards. I think that would be a disaster, because basically we would not be able to afford, as you were saying, we would not be able to afford as much war, but they would. So they would still be plundering their citizens to fund their militaries, and they would definitely come after the US if the US got rid of the Federal Reserve. So that's why I think Bitcoin is sort of the only way, because Bitcoin, what it does is it defunds all of the central banks all at the same time. And it kind of, it's the only way that I can see to kind of peacefully unwind the fiat money system and bring in this new system. And the only way to really do that is if the US government kind of gradually buys into the US to the Bitcoin standard. Basically, the most peaceful way I can see to transition from a fiat standard to a Bitcoin standard is to just have the US government slowly transition itself from a dollar standard to a Bitcoin standard. So it's going to have to give up a lot of power to do that, but it could save basically a lot of bloodshed.
I mean, I love the idea of a peaceful revolution. Like, I don't want to be a part of, I don't want to be in the trenches with a, AR-15 and bulletproof vest. Like, that's not the world I want to live in. That's why earlier I was mentioning, like, Bitcoin's great, but if you're the only one on the life raft, it's like, so gradually is maybe better than suddenly in some way. Like
100%.
As much as we all want to see.
We want to do this thing like, I mean, it's like in Indiana Jones, where he's taking the artifact and he has to put another thing in its place. Like, that's basically what we're doing right now.
Okay,
we got to be really careful.
yeah, because shit can break, and economies are already on thin ice, and so if some of these aggressive actions that are happening, I'm curious if you have any perspective living in Mexico, talking to Mexicans about some of the rhetoric that's coming out of the United States.
I've in recent months, I've just been trying to focus on building, and I haven't been trying to. I've been watching the news, but it's hard I'm reluctant to form opinions about it because I'm kind of cautiously optimistic about it, I guess. I'm really impressed by the crew that Trump had join him. Actually, I was a RFK fan, and I ended up voting for RFK. Even though RFK was like, you shouldn't vote for me, you should vote for Trump. But I voted for RFK because I just don't like Trump, okay? But RFK joined Trump, and Elon joined, and Tulsi Gabbard joined Trump, and JD Vance, I don't know him as well, he seems like a cool guy, and Kash Patel and Pam Bondi, and he got this crew of people who are basically who were kind of the most hopeful people anywhere to deliver some change to the system. I don't know if the system is capable of changing, but if anybody can do it, it's them. And again, I don't like Trump. I think he's a scammer. I think he's, a narcissist. I think he's, just out for glory. But at the same time, he does seem to be really, really good at understanding what people care about. And he got a bunch of great people to do the things that people wanted the government to do. So, I guess that's a long way of saying, I'm cautiously optimistic.
What are you hearing from the community around here? Are people anti-Trump or
I don't talk to people. You don't talk to people really. I just like I said, I just kind of I watch it and I have some thoughts about it, but everybody's really different. Actually, it's very easy to offend people. And I'm just trying to collaborate with people and build software I'm not shy about having opinions. It's just I feel like it's a waste of time at this point to go into those conversations because it could go either way, right? If somebody was like Trump is the worst thing to ever happen, I'd be like maybe you're right. Or if he's like Trump is the best thing that ever happened, I'd be like maybe you're right. But. I could basically be convinced, either way, but I feel like, we just need to kind of, time will tell, that kind of thing.
That's for sure, man. Yeah, I mean, you can't judge someone in the first couple weeks, first couple months. I also remain cautiously optimistic. I never trust a politician, but I do like the idea that, now the zeitgeist or the Overton window has shifted to a point where people are talking about auditing the Federal Reserve in a serious way. People are asking these questions of where's the money going? Maybe some accountability is happening. Trump is the first, to my knowledge, first president who was not a politician or in the military previously, which is pretty exciting. Say what you want. This guy did not come from the typical sort of cloth that many of the other politicians come from. And
like I was saying, there's good ways to be a government and there's bad ways to be a government. And as we're transitioning from the fiat standard to the Bitcoin standard, the good way to do it is to downsize the federal government because it's going to lose funding. It's inevitable. There is no way to stop people from avoiding the inflation tax, the income tax, and the capital gains tax, and other taxes, but mostly those three moving forward. And so governments are they're going to have to cut their spending to get ahead of that, because if they don't, things are going to get violent. I mean, there's just no way around it.
For sure.
So if the US can sort of be the good guy and lead the way and show China and Russia and these other sort of large nation states, like, here's how you do it, here's how you clean stuff up, here's how you go, here's how you get ready for a Bitcoin standard, and you embrace Bitcoin. You don't ban it, because any country that bans Bitcoin is going to end up losing once we flip from the fiat standard to the Bitcoin standard. And any countries that embrace it are just going to suck out all the entrepreneurs and all the people who are building wealth and all the employers. They're just going to go to the places that are friendly to Bitcoin.
Yeah.
So it looks like the U.S. government right now is kind of doing stuff right. So but I'm sure that Mexicans are not happy about Trump. Basically being like, oh well, your cartels are terrorist organizations, and you're
deporting Mexicans.
We're deporting people.
Yeah. I haven't seen much evidence of that really happening.
If the Mexican government was like, we're going to deport Americans, I'd be like, okay, that's up to them. It's up to them,
we're foreigners in their country.
That's their territory, yeah. So
if you go to Japan, you can't just become a citizen. Like, they're not going to open the doors. And they have a pretty safe and secure country.
Yeah.
So I'm curious to switch subjects a little bit. This is a question that I asked on one of my first podcasts because I'm just learning, and I'm curious, what your stance on trading in general is. Like, have you ever looked into, do you see value in understanding charts and technical analysis and all this stuff? Because I have some smart friends that do it and do it well, and it's like, I'm not going to hate on them for doing that. And it's a very, especially during a bull market, it's like, you can get more Bitcoin with your little charts and trading. For me personally, it's not worth, the peace of mind. A take that I generally have is people don't put enough value on their peace of mind. So you have these and most people, you talk to Bitcoin OGs, they're like, you'd have more Bitcoin if you just bought and hold. But let's say we're in this 4-year cycle. Right now, we're towards the end of the bull market. Assuming that's a thing. Do you think that's a thing? Do you think that all the models break, or do you think that...
I think all the models break. I think there is something to the 4-year cycle, obviously, because of the halving. And I think just given past performance, it's pretty likely that Bitcoin will rip this year. Absolutely rip. Melt faces rip. But...
what is that? So what does that mean? I know you don't put a lot of attention on the price, but...
Yeah, so...
What would surprise you? What would be melt face surprising?
You mean name a number?
Yeah.
All right,
I'll name a number.
All right, so in 2013, we hit 1,100. In 2017, we hit 20,000. So that was a 20x gain from the previous all-time high. In 2021, we hit 69K, something like that. And then we just recently got above that again. I think that was 2021, maybe 2022, something like that. And that was a 3x gain, So, and I think there was a bubble earlier than 2013 that was 30 or 35x or something like that from the previous all-time high. So that's kind of been my, my tea leaves, I don't think technical analysis is worth it. I think especially listening to somebody else's technical analysis, especially if that person is popular, the incentives are such that person can just benefit by telling you the opposite of what's true. So just take Jim Cramer as the canonical example of somebody who just tells you the opposite of what's really going to happen. And then, all of the lemmings just, run off the cliff, and then, he and his insider buddies, I assume he gets some kind of tips from somewhere. So, because he's really good. I don't know if you've seen the reverse Jim Cramer.
Right. Yeah, it's hilarious.
It's really, really good at this point. But people who do crypto technical analysis or Bitcoin technical analysis are the same thing. The incentives are the same way. If everybody knows that, there's going to be a big movement up, then a bunch of people are going to start buying, right? And then the people who, the more that people follow that advice, the more that the people giving that advice can game that to try and dump on everybody at the right minute, at the right moment. I've been around long enough that I traded altcoins, back before they were considered shitcoins, I never owned anything that I would consider a shitcoin. Is that true? I kind of dipped my feet in that, but I quickly realized, I eventually realized, especially in 2017 with the ICO bubble, that, like you said, I would have had more if I just put that into Bitcoin and held. So, I know traders who are very good at trading, who are very good at they have bots or they have, technical analysis or whatever, and they're doing a lot of short-term trading. And, there is a lot of money in that, if you get really, really good at it. But number one, do you want to be a trader as your full-time job and never actually get a real job and never actually create any value? Are you okay with, that being your existence and stressing about prices and stressing about charts and, maybe eking out a little bit more performance than you would have gotten if you had just bought Bitcoin and not worried about anything? Is this something that you want to do full time? And do you care that you're literally wasting your life? If so, go ahead and trade. But if not, I would say don't do it.
Well, that's the big aha moment for me. Was I had this mindset because I always growing up I was decent at math, and I remember one time maybe in middle school or late in elementary school, I was probably 12 years old. I was like, okay, what's the average salary? What does a car cost? And I was like, a car costs almost the average salary. And then I was like, how does anyone own a car? That doesn't make sense. Then you realize it's because we're a debt-based system. Most people don't even own their cars. They're up making payments. But for me, the peace of mind, it's so profound that instead of needing to build a business, scale it, sell it for millions of dollars in order to accrue wealth, I can just add value to society. First of all, build some skills that have value, find a place in the market that values those skills, which I found, which is holding this camera and, there's video is in demand more so than many services, and then take that and store it in the hardest asset ever known to mankind. And the peace of mind of that, I just sleep so well at night. It's just such a beautiful thing. I couldn't put a dollar amount on that. Now here I am. I'm not stressing. I'm working on the podcast. I don't make any money from this stuff, but I'm not stressing about money because I know that I have a sound place to store my work.
Exactly. Yeah.
I'm also not fearful of working, right? A lot of people in the fiat world are how do I retire early and, basically stop adding value to society. That's death to me. I would like to be adding value until the day I'm dead. So.
Yeah, dude, I completely resonate with that. The biggest Chad move in today's society is, staying humble, building something of real value, of real lasting value for other people, and storing your money in Bitcoin. That's just there's this fiat, image of what success looks like, and it's Lambos and gold chains and hoes, and it's okay, fine, if that's what you're into, but I really don't see that as it's not disruptive, right? If in order to get that lifestyle, you have to sell your soul to the man, to the system. I mean, you gotta sell out totally. And as they say, what is it worth to gain the whole world and lose your soul?
Fascinating. When you get to the end of your life and you're on your deathbed and you're looking back, you can't take those dollars with you to the grave, know. The thing I have found with Bitcoiners is I haven't met any Bitcoiners with Lambos. I'm sure there are some. There's a lot of Bitcoiners that are still very fiat minded, but generally I've seen
get yourself a nice present every now and then,
For
but
sure.
Just don't make that the core of your existence,
At the end of the day, Bitcoin's just money, and my friend and co-producer on the Bulgaria film I'm working on wrote a paper on digit addiction. And it's one of those ideas, once you see it, you can't unsee it. We're all addicted to digits.
Number go up.
Yeah, but not just in dollars, like in everything. It's I want more. I want to put more plates on the barbell. I want to I want to run more miles in an ultra marathon. I want a car that goes 0 to 60 faster. It's just constantly seeking more and more and more. We're like programmed. We're programmed from such an early age to be addicted to digits. And I'm doing a very bad job. Like, you should read his article. It's awesome. It's published in Bitcoin Magazine as well. It's really good.
Well, to some extent, I think that's true. But like on the other hand, I think there are certain digits that you actually do want to maximize, and it would be worth your time to sort of pay attention to those things, like your time, right? Like if more people paid attention to like how many hours a day do I spend, doing useless make work, at my Fiat mining job, like rather than like connecting with people and like having meaningful shared emotional experiences or shared aesthetic experiences or volunteering, like helping people in need, you can't put a number on those things, but you could put a time quantity on those things. And so, and how much money do I spend on this versus how much money do I spend on that? I agree that people, it's tempting to be very sort of low resolution about the digits that you're looking at, and you're just like, oh, I just want that number to go up, But like I said, if you take sort of a higher resolution view of it, I think you can, our brains are to some extent like optimization machines, and that is an effective way to improve what really matters in your life, and get more out of life.
Well, to pull on that a little bit more, I want to talk a little bit about what you're working on specifically, because we're all making a bet with our time of what we think is going to lead to whatever result, right? Like, I think that having a podcast and growing and having people that get value from the podcast is going to be valuable. Why? Because I'd like to live a lifestyle where I can talk to cool people, I can travel, I can show my kids that, hey, with hard work and with some curiosity and dedication to what you're doing, you can live a very fulfilling life. And you talked initially about like what drives you to really like see Bitcoin become this reserve asset, but what specifically are you working on? Why is like tie in just like the software side of it, and how, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but how software is key to building this vessel, if you will.
I guess once you kind of step off the fiat treadmill, the question is what next, And so I had kind of a breakdown maybe about 8 years ago where I was like, okay, how much savings do I have, and how much time can I just quit my job now? Basically, how much time do I have before I need to just like figure out what I'm going to do next? Sure. Because fiat world, if you grow up in fiat world as a kid, it just kind of puts you on this treadmill, and and you do school, and then you do your studies, and you do your activities, and then you go to college, and you get your degree, and then you go into industry, and then you start doing that, and like you never get to know yourself, and you never you take the time and zoom out and be like, what am I really doing? What do I really want to do? What are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my likes? What sort of things do I not like? What are my values? What am I trying to really bring to the world? Like you said, when you're on your deathbed, like what sorts of things do you want to have done? And I guess a lot of it is just having time, to reflect and think about those things. So
what a blessing to have that time.
Yeah, Bitcoin afforded brief moments of that to me in my life, and it's been as you said, it's a blessing. It's really great. But I've used that time to sort of figure out what is really important. So it's sort of basically just the things that I told you. I want other people to have I want to take my pain points and I want to help other people not experience those things. So if you just kind of dive from university straight into a software job, it's really hard to find mentors. It's really hard to find just like people who care about your development as a software engineer. And so and just in general, sort of like authority figures that you can respect, and not and not authority figures who abuse their position of power. People who are good leaders, and so. I feel like I spent like a lot of, I wasted a lot of time trying to become a good software engineer. And so I feel like it's actually pretty straightforward to become a good software engineer. You just need some people to mentor you who know what the hell is going on. So that's what I've been doing. I've basically just been mentoring people, sort of local devs. There's a lot of really, really great devs in Mexico and Latin America generally. There's just not a lot of great information, and so especially people who are sort of looking for the next, how do I get ahead sort of thing. There's okay, I'll get into crypto, or I'll get into AI, or I'll get into blockchain, and they have these kind of buzzwords that they see, and they're looking for sort of like an edge on the competition. What sorts of things should I work towards so that someday I'm ahead, right? I'm just trying to get ahead. And I think Bitcoin development is that thing. I think if you learn I think development in general, right, is not a skill that's likely it's not a marketable job that's likely to lose value suddenly. We have AI that can write code, kind of, but you also need to have actual engineers to put it all together and make it work. Okay, maybe famous last words. I don't know. We'll see. But sort of creative things. Things where you're creating an experience for somebody, or I guess understanding computers, there's always going to be a demand for a human that understands a computer, because if you don't, you're just going to have a computer that understands the computer. And eventually you might get Skynet, right? You might just have it all centralized and it becomes this one big, computer system. And then nobody can trust the computer, and it's not bringing value to anybody's lives because it's just this tyrannical thing that's controlling everybody's lives. So we don't want that. We want humans that understand computers, and that's always going to be valuable, I think. So I'm just teaching people how to be devs, how to understand computers, and and I think this sort of this idea of sovereignty, right? This idea of I understand the computer, and so if somebody tells me a fact about a computer program or a cryptocurrency, I can kind of differentiate the signal from the noise, right? If somebody's just spewing a bunch of bullshit, I understand enough about what's going on that I can tell, right? I can just tell, okay, this person is just making stuff up, and there's a lot of that, right? Fiat world incentivizes the creation of a lot of bullshit. So, there's just a fire hose of it out there right now. But yeah, basically I'm just, I'm teaching people Bitcoin dev, and I'm teaching merchants how to use Bitcoin. And I'm really trying to benefit the people that I'm working with, right? I'm not trying to focus on getting rich quick, right? Getting as much money as possible in as short time as possible. Because if I wanted to do that, I would just sell out. There are very easy ways to just do terrible things and get a lot of attention while you're doing it and get paid lots of money. That's how a lot of people do it these days. But yeah, it's about building a community of people who trust each other and people who share values. And that's what I find most meaningful right now. So that's what I'm working on.
I love it, man. Yeah, I appreciate that a ton. I am thinking about having kids in the next couple of years, and I ask the question of what community are they going to grow up in? It's critical for me to have them be in a community that shares values with me. If I raise my kids where I'm at now in Seattle, my family's around, it's great, but I worry, first of all, I can't send them to public school. So that's off the table. And paying for private school or doing tutors and all that in the US, it's not easy.
It's not cheap.
So I have this vision for the future where there's these hubs of Bitcoiners around the world, and you can generally assume that they will have good values. They'll share those values, whatever they might be, freedom, sovereignty, lack of trust to higher authorities. Those are the people that I want to surround myself with. No
scamming, no shitcoining.
Totally, man.
If they're Bitcoin only, usually they're pretty good. Although even that space has started to get invaded by the shitcoiners recently, but it's another topic.
Yeah, and the digital nomad world. Like there's people that are, they have the freedom to work and live anywhere in the world. By the way, would you consider yourself a digital nomad? You've been here 7 years.
Yeah,
so.
more or less.
Yeah.
Kind of. Yeah.
Yeah.
I do like sort of hanging around in the same general area because I like how the longer you spend in one spot, the value that you can get from hanging out there increases exponentially.
Yeah. If you're just a rolling stone rolling from place to place, it's very hard to have
to start over
roots.
every time.
Yeah. There's something very beautiful about that, but. Maybe
so no, I wouldn't really consider myself a digital nomad.
Yeah, I don't consider myself that either, but I just love the freedom to be able to work from anywhere. Like I can pull up my laptop and I'm able to work. It doesn't matter where it is, and that's I think a trend that's only going to grow.
Yeah, I mean, I like the ability to travel anywhere and go and see new places and meet Bitcoiners in exotic new cities, international cities. But I have to balance that against what I just said, which is the longer I spend in one place, the more value I get out of being here. And like I said, the gains are exponential. They're not linear.
Interesting.
So it's really cool.
That's very cool. Yeah, I appreciate that. We talked a little bit about the other day. You were just in Brazil, I believe, at a hacker conference. So
Bitcoin plus plus.
Bitcoin plus plus.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about
best Bitcoin tech conference.
Why?
Because it's the highest signal and lowest noise, I would say.
Huh.
I hope it stays that way. A lot of times, it's the smaller conferences that manage that. And Lisa is the person organizing that conference series, and she does a great job. And she knows a lot of the most sort of not like important or well-known Bitcoiners, but the Bitcoiners who are actually building stuff and actually know how stuff works. And that's what I really like, right? I really like going and just hanging out with this like massive, knowledge base and like wisdom base and like brain power. And it's so much fun to hang out with those people and have those conversations. And then there's usually a hackathon, and there's usually workshops, and there's actual people building actual things. It's like the opposite of a crypto conference where you just have like booths and booth babes, and people are like, so what's your product? Oh, well, we're gonna blockchain with the AI, and we're gonna like, they just like dropping buzzwords, and you're like, and you get like a minute or two, and you're like, they're not doing anything.
Yeah, so
they just want people to buy. They're not even trying.
Yeah. I met someone very briefly. I don't know what her name is, but she was saying that she started a crypto token called Lovecoin, and the way to access your funds is if you're open to love. And I was like, I don't know. As soon as she said that, I was like, walk in the other direction. There's just some crazy stuff.
Cryptographic proof of love.
Yeah, you put a little sensor by your heart. Oh man, there's some crazy ideas out there, but and a lot of these ideas are attractive, and there's very smart, articulate people that will say, look, Bitcoin is the slow one. We're doing something that's going to replace Bitcoin or something like that.
The next Bitcoin is Bitcoin. You heard it here first.
Yeah, I get a text from people that are like, so other than Bitcoin, what are the coins that you're looking at? I'm like, dude, I'm looking at Sats, I'm looking at Lightning,
yeah.
But yeah, no, that's all good.
Lightning, people don't even understand how much of a sleeping giant Lightning is. Like Lightning,
people hate on Lightning.
Bullish on Lightning.
Really?
Because they know that Lightning's about to eat their lunch because it actually fucking works.
It works so well.
It works really well.
Yeah.
But it's actually, Lightning is the best thing in the crypto ecosystem. It's the coolest technology to come out of cryptocurrency ever. And
explain for someone who's never heard of it or very new to it, like how does it work? Why does it work? What are the problems that it solves?
Yeah, so the problems that Lightning solves are, so originally we had on-chain Bitcoin, and that's just sending a transaction, sending a UTXO, an unspent transaction output, a coin, you're sending a coin on Bitcoin's blockchain from you to somebody else. And so the problem with this is when the system starts to see a lot of usage, the blocks fill up. And the reason why we have a limit on the blocks is a very good reason. It's so that anybody can sync a Bitcoin node, so that anybody with even a very cheap computer can sync a Bitcoin node. And so basically, we have to have a block size limit. And then, but we have to work within that, right? So when the blocks fill up, now you have to compete with other transactors for that block space. And so, if you pay a high enough fee, you will get included into the next block. But if you don't pay a high enough fee, your transaction is going to get passed over, and you're just going to have to sit there and wait until the fees come down again, and then your transaction gets mined. And so, back in the day when we used to try to do, merchant onboarding with on-chain Bitcoin, it was cool as long as the merchant was like, I'm going to accept a zero-conf Bitcoin transaction, which is basically like, if it's in the mempool, I'll count it as good.
Right.
But this is extremely insecure, like very, very, very not recommendable.
Because they can replace it and then send it to a different wallet or scam you somehow like that.
Yes. Yeah. And the BCH people will say, oh, we've solved all the problems with zero-conf, but they haven't. That's bullshit. The problem, of course, is that once the blocks fill up, transactions that pay a low enough fee are just going to get evicted from the mempool. They're effectively going to get reversed. And they're just never, ever, ever going to confirm. Or they're going to take a year to confirm, right? And the merchant who's trying to sell you, a coffee, does not want to take a year, to get the money. And of course, you can just once your transaction has been evicted from the mempool, you can just create a new transaction and send it back to yourself. It doesn't scale. And then they say, oh, well, the blocks aren't going to fill up because we're going to make our blocks infinitely large. We're not going to have a block size limit, or we're going to have a dynamic block size limit. It's like, okay, well, but all of these things are gameable by large miners, and they all have these like extreme centralization forces. And anyway, so all of that out of the way. The only secure way to do untrusted in-person payments is something like Lightning. The only way that isn't a terrible UX and doesn't destroy node centralization is to do something like Lightning. And so what it does is, so the biggest benefit that's immediate that works right now is this sort of instant finality thing that you already brought up. A merchant it gives you the coffee, or you send them the Lightning, they give you the coffee, and the transaction is over. There's no chance of the transaction getting reversed. And so, it's immediate. Sometimes if you're using Tor, if you're like, you got a bunch of privacy stuff set up, it might take like up to 30 seconds for the transaction to actually go through. But I've seen credit cards take that long. So it's, and we're improving, right? Like the reliability of Lightning is improving all the time. And then the cool thing about that is that now there's a bunch of small transactions, coffee transactions, that are not happening on chain. So not only do you get the benefit of, okay, now all my transaction is going through immediately and I can just take the product that I'm buying and I can go out of the store and that's fine. So not only do you get that benefit, but you also get the benefit of all these like tiny transactions are not going on the blockchain. Right. So now you have a bunch more room for larger transactions and things like Lightning channel opens and closes, which, so Lightning sort of, it solves this problem and then it gives itself more room to solve more problems. So it's kind of like a virtuous cycle thing. I don't know if you want me to go into like technically how Lightning works, but we can do that if you want. I don't know.
Yeah, and I'm curious. Yeah, that's the time, 6 p.m. But I am curious. Like my understanding is that there's the base chain, layer 1, and then Lightning's a layer 2. So the most simple way I could think about it is like Venmo almost. Like it's different in the sense that it actually, like the funds are actually moving because I've done a Venmo transaction on Facebook Marketplace and then they should do a chargeback and then all of a sudden I'm negative $50 in my account. But how does it technically work? It's you peg out and peg into the main chain in batches.
Yeah, so what happens is there's two transactions there's two on-chain transactions that happen in a Lightning channel. There's the opening transaction, which creates the channel, and there's the closing transaction, which destroys the channel and sends the funds to the
base chain,
to the people. To the people to the participants in the channel. So so a Lightning channel is it's a 2-of-2 multisig. So basically, there needs to be two sides of every Lightning channel. It's a bilateral agreement.
And do they need to trust each other? Yeah.
They don't have to trust each other, but it's better if they do. Okay. Because if they don't trust each other, you can end up basically spending more money in the channel than you saved by moving from on-chain to Lightning.
Okay.
But in the case where, but the incentives are set up such that nobody is going to do that probably, right? Like you would, like maybe there are like hostile state actors that want to destroy Bitcoin and want to attack Lightning, and then they would do that. But mostly people who are on Lightning are trying to have long-term, good faith business relationships.
The incentives are there for that.
Yeah, exactly. And so, so I don't know if you want me to. I can just kind of jump into how Lightning works, or we can just kind of like keep answering your questions. I don't know if I'm answering your questions.
No, man, you're great. And you're insanely smart. So I'm genuinely curious, like, about some of the technical stuff, because like we talked about the other day, I showed up using Speed Lightning Wallet, which is a custodial wallet, and I lost 20 points on the cool factor. So one of the things that when I go home, I'm going to look into is your, I believe it's 5 different parts on a tutorial that you did on how to set up like a whole, basically fully non-custodial Lightning setup.
Yeah. So my favorite Lightning wallet is Phoenix Wallet. It's the best Bitcoin wallet experience that I've ever seen. Including all of the, back before the blocks filled up like a decade ago. Phoenix Wallet is better than all of those because, again, it has this instant finality thing, which you never had even with like Mycelium, So it just blows every other Bitcoin wallet ever out of the water. But there's this problem that I keep running into people from the US who use Apple.
Sure.
And if you're from the US and you use Apple, you cannot use Phoenix Wallet because they have exited that country on the Apple App Store, and they've also done that on the Google Play Store. But with the Google Play Store, there's a workaround. So if you're an Android user, you can sideload Phoenix Wallet. So that's what I recommend if you're on Android. But if your Apple account is in the US and you have iOS and you're not willing to use Android, it's kind of hard to use Lightning. Actually, Lightning is not a great experience. Unless you're willing to set up a tiny Lightning server. So I gave a workshop in Brazil just a couple weeks ago about setting up a tiny Lightning server. And I wanted to teach people how to do this, mostly because you can set up a point of sale system for your shop to accept Lightning. But another thing you can do is you can get around the limitations on Phoenix if you're an iOS user. And the way that you do that is you set up Phoenix D instead of Phoenix Wallet. So Phoenix D is the same Lightning node that's inside of Phoenix, like a little embedded Lightning node inside of the wallet. But instead of running it on your phone, you run it on a server. And a server can just be a laptop that's plugged in all the time, or it could be a cell phone that's on all the time that you just leave at home, or it can be you can use a little single board computer that's $20 called the Orange Pi that I used for my tutorial. It's not important what hardware you use, just probably something cheap and something that you can leave plugged in all the time. So you can run Phoenix D on that, and that behaves the same as the Phoenix mobile wallet. And the benefit of that is that you don't have to do, like, you maybe heard of like channel management and like managing your liquidity and opening and closing channels and setting your fees and stuff like that.
Yeah.
If you use Phoenix, you have a single channel with their LSP, which is called async. Or it's a French company, so it's like Async. I don't really know how to say it, so I just say async. And you just have a channel with them, and then basically their LSP has these little services that it sells. So they can like give you a zero conf channel, so that like they can sort of trust you a little bit, and when you're receiving your first Lightning payment, you get your money in an unconfirmed channel, and you can send the money out, until it gets confirmed, and then it's no longer a zero conf channel. And then there's this thing called inbound liquidity where, so our 2-of-2 multi-sig, so imagine that you have a channel with me. So some of the money is on your side of the channel and some of the money is on my side of the channel. And fundamentally, this is the basic building block of the Lightning Network, is this channel idea. And, we can't have, if our channel is 100,000 sats, and you try to receive 200,000 sats, you can't.
Right.
We have to make the channel bigger. And so what Phoenix does for you is it allows you to pay them a fee to do that on the fly while you're receiving the payment.
Okay.
So it kind of smooths out all of the kinks of using Lightning.
Got it.
Yeah.
Very interesting. So what's the easiest way, like if I'm going home and I want to start to onboard merchants to accepting Lightning payments, like would you recommend Phoenix D as like the way to do that?
Only if they're somewhat technical.
If they're not, then what would
Yeah, if they're the sort of person that they're afraid of the command line, which is most people.
Which is me, yeah.
Then you should not. You should not do that. I can, again, if you were staying for another few days, I would show you how to do it. It's not that bad. You just need somebody to kind of hold your hand. Or maybe you might even be able to do the tutorial and not ask for help. I don't know. That's kind of where I want to get. I want to get to, I just have the tutorial. Even if you're afraid of the command line, you just do it and it just works. But for somebody who like, you're not going to like be there to help them set it up and you don't like know all the things that can go wrong.
Yeah.
So I would recommend Wallet of Satoshi. But somebody who doesn't, like if you just know merchants and they don't care about Bitcoin and they're not going to hold Bitcoin, I honestly wouldn't recommend setting them up to accept Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Like they're just gonna stop. They're just gonna forget how to use it.
Okay, so
they're gonna sell it all for fiat. It's not, you know. And then if they get on the Bitcoin map, there's gonna be some Bitcoiner comes in out of town like a month later. They're gonna go there. They're gonna be like, this business is terrible, and also they don't even know what Bitcoin is.
Yeah.
You know. So it's like just get the people who actually care, who are actually gonna hold Bitcoin, and if they are really, really, really untechnical, but still somehow they understand Bitcoin.
Yes.
Which is hard to find, give them Wallet of Satoshi.
Okay.
You know, and then just give them a warning. That's like, you know, they have custody of your coins. They could rug you, you know, and also they can see everything you're doing.
So then you would tell them, hey, use Wallet of Satoshi when you have, call it a couple $100, whatever you think is
some amount that
amount that you don't want to lose.
Painful to use.
Now then you move it to your cold storage.
Exactly. You would have a hardware wallet and you would send it there.
And does Wallet of Satoshi allow you to transit, like to peg out like Aqua does from Lightning to base chain, or how would you send from Wallet of Satoshi?
Yes, they let you do that. They let you send on-chain Bitcoin from your Wallet of Satoshi wallet because it's all their node at the end of the day. It's just a database entry in there. You know, it's an account in their database, and so you can send on-chain Bitcoin anywhere you want from Wallet of Satoshi. However, I would not recommend this because they charge a pretty high fee. Okay. It might not be that high. I don't remember. It was kind of painful the last time I saw somebody do it. So I think it was like 1% or something like that.
It's better than 3% for the credit cards.
Yeah, and it might have been higher than that. I don't remember exactly. I don't use Wallet of Satoshi that much. But you mentioned Aqua. What Aqua does is it uses a service called Bolts. And Bolts does swaps between on-chain and Lightning. And you can actually do on-chain Bitcoin or on-chain Liquid, and then you can use Lightning, and you can swap all of those for each other. I think they had another one too, like RSK or something like that. But Bolts is a great service. I show it to everybody. I love Bolts. And it lets you, so this is what I would use, right? So if you have Wallet of Satoshi and you want to send to your cold wallet, what you would do is you would get an on-chain address from your cold wallet, and you would put that into Bolts, and then you would put in an amount that you want to send, and then that's going to give you a Lightning invoice, and then you send from Wallet of Satoshi to that Lightning invoice, and that's going to atomically swap, trustlessly swap the Lightning, the off-chain for the on-chain.
Okay.
Right? And your fees are going to be a lot lower that way. Bolts actually does charge a fee, obviously, for this service, but I believe it's much less than what Wallet of Satoshi charges.
Okay. So then you're using, this Bolts is inside of Aqua?
No.
Bolts
Aqua is a
separate
thing.
Separate thing.
Bolts is a swap service.
Okay.
They're basically they're kind of like a Lightning services provider.
Okay.
But they're kind of like an MSP, except but they don't offer channel services. You can open a channel to Bolts, which is not a terrible idea. But their sort of bread and butter is swaps, so on-chain to off-chain swaps. And then there's a bunch of, because their service works so well, because it's so affordable, there's a lot of apps that have sort of been built around just like, that are totally dependent on that, basically.
Okay.
So Aqua is one of those. They basically just use Bolts for all of the transactions when you're sending from, actually for all of their transactions. So all of it, I think on Aqua, you actually end up holding liquid Bitcoin. And then whenever you send over Lightning, there's an atomic swap that goes out over Lightning.
Oh, really?
And whenever you receive
That's why
Lightning,
it's so damn slow.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. I have tons of...
Is it slow? I don't know. I don't use Aqua, actually, but yeah, so people who... That's sort of like if you have Apple and a US account,
Yeah.
Aqua is actually like an okay option.
Okay. Because that's what I've been using, and I'll send like an Aqua invoice for Lightning, and it just won't work. Like it'll just it'll just not show up, and then the funds will return to the person that was sending it or whatever. So that's why I've been using Speed Wallet, because it just works.
Okay, I haven't heard of people having UX issues like that with Aqua. Was it recent?
Yeah, but it's happened a bunch of times.
All right. Well, maybe Aqua's having some problems.
Yeah, I don't know.
They're I believe they're open source, so you should be able to just report the bug and give them a report.
Okay.
That's one thing I really value, is the open source ethos.
Yes.
Which is like, in contrast to fiat world. In fiat world, when you have a problem, you just complain about it and maybe like you yell at them on Twitter. But in open source, which all of Bitcoin is open source, when you find a problem, it's kind of your duty to like report that problem and like make a report and like, maybe if you have some coding skills, like maybe contribute a fix.
Offer a solution or something.
Yeah, because like code's all there,
Yeah.
And usually open source projects have much, much, much less funding than closed source projects. So
that's true. Yeah. Well, I want to ask you finally, if you were going to give one piece of advice, like if you're someone that's a developer, someone coming to you and saying, hey, I'm curious, I want to be part of the bright orange future. What's one thing that you would tell them, or one piece of advice that you would share?
Oh man. I would say, get rich slow, don't get rich quick, live within your means, don't trade. Run a node. Run your own. Learn how to run a server. That's not that hard. It's not that hard.
No, I figured it out.
It's not that
BTC
hard.
Sessions, I figured it out. Yeah.
Dude, great YouTube channel.
He is awesome.
BTC Sessions is awesome.
Yes, sir.
He's the GOAT.
Cool. Well, Chris, man, thank you so much. You're a wealth of knowledge, to say the least. I hope we can do this again next time I visit. Open door if you ever come to Seattle.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, man. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
This was a fun conversation.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.